My name is Michelle Bonniwell. I am the Director of Children's Ministry here at the Water's Edge. If you're visiting us, thank you so much for being here. We are on week 3 of our Love Doves series. Love Doves is actually one of my all-time favorite books, so I'm super excited to be able to be here and sharing with you this morning. Before I start, I have a question. How many of you guys are runners? Like you absolutely love to run? There's a handful of you guys. Okay, I hate running. It is my least favorite thing to do. There are a million other things I would rather do than run. But because I am clumsy as all get out, I have learned that running is one of about 3 physical activities that I can handle without seriously injuring myself. Unless I'm on a treadmill, and then all bets are off. You know that little plug thingy you're supposed to attach to yourself when you run on the treadmill? It's really important. Just my advice for today. Recently, I took on a new running partner. He is awesome, great conversationalist. We have a good time, and I think I have a picture of him right there. That is my 5-year-old Felix. Felix and I have recently started running together, and running with Felix goes something a little like this. He sprints, I chase, and we hope no one gets hurt. And the day this was taken, Felix was just being his normal rowdy self. Felix starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he does not stop until about 10 o'clock at night, wide open all the time. So this particular day, I talked him into going for a run with me if we could stop at the park along the way before we headed home. And Felix takes off down the road, down the trails, and I could not keep up that day. It was an exhausted mom day, and he just kept going and going and going, and I would holler at him, hey, slow down, watch out for that car, watch out for that dog, and he just would not stop. So I did what any good mom does. I just let him run. And he got out of my eyesight. I knew where he was heading. He couldn't see me, and I know you guys are all thinking, wow, she's in charge of our children. But I knew what I was doing. I'll put some money in his therapy jar. It'll be fine. So I let Felix just run, just to see what he was going to do. Now, just so you know, I have a 14-year-old, and he's made it this far, so, I'm not too bad at this parenting thing. But when I finally got around the corner to where Felix was, he was just sitting on the trail, cross-legged, just kind of watching the birds and talking to himself, doing what Felix does, and my heart just sunk because I thought, he's sitting down, he tripped, he fell, he got hurt, he's upset. Oh no, he's smiling, just being his normal self. And I get to him and I'm like, Felix, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to get that far ahead of me. I didn't mean to scare you. And he looks at me. I wasn't scared, Mommy. I wasn't scared at all. Well, why not, bud? Well, you love me, Mommy. And I knew you wouldn't quit chasing me. I just had to stop. And right then, 2 things hit me. One, once again, it was reiterated that kids are so much smarter than adults. And 2, he had just written my sermon for me. Done. But think about it. Think about just love in general. Don't we all long for that one person that's going to continue to chase us? And not necessarily a romantic love, but just that love, that feeling of community, that friendship where no matter what we do, what we say, where we came from, this person is going to continually pursue us. This person is going to go to where we are, despite our junk, despite our misgivings, just despite of all of it. They're going to continue to chase us and pursue us. I have 2 boys, Felix and Wolf, and I would do anything for these boys. I will chase them to the ends of the earth because that's how much I love them. But for some of us, love is hard. And when it comes to other relationships, for me, I'm a runner. You see, when people get too close, that's when the insecurities start. That's when I start wondering, if they knew all about my past, or they knew what went on inside my head, they won't love me so much. They're not going to want to chase after me. If they knew the real me, could they really love me? I let past relationships dictate what happens to current relationships. And when people get too close, I start creating things to push them away. It's just how I'm wired. And some of you guys are like that too. And the problem with that is it starts to carry over into our spiritual lives as well. All that junk going on in our head that we use with relationships with other people, it starts going into our heads with our relationship with God. Well, if that person who was my best friend can't love me, how would a perfect God love an imperfect me? How could the God of the heavens and earth who created all this magnificent stuff want me? But he does. That's the cool thing about God. He never gives up on his children. His pursuit of us is patient, it's passionate, it's relentless. And when we don't go to him, he doesn't give up. He comes to us. He comes to where we are. And many times, he leads us to a place of stillness so that we can experience him. Now, most of us are familiar with the story of Jonah. You guys know Jonah? Yeah. As a children's pastor, it's one that I teach quite often. In fact, we have a 6-foot blow-up well at our house just for those occasions. But Jonah is a story that many of us can relate to, even though we don't think we can. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them, away from the presence of the Lord. 2 things I want to point out to you. The first, God knew the people of Nineveh were messing up. He knew they were doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And at that point in time, he could have easily washed his hands of them. But those were his children. So he calls upon his child Jonah to go to him and say, "Hey guys, you're messing up. It's time to fix this." He didn't wash his hands of them at that point. He was trying, because those were his children. Jonah was chosen by God to go to Nineveh. But for whatever reason, Jonah was scared. One, the people in Nineveh were kind of crazy. They were doing bad things. It was a scary place. But I'm thinking Jonah had some other issues going on there where he didn't feel confident in his ability. Yes, God called him to do this, but he didn't think he could. So he ran. Because you can run from God, right? Because God won't know where you are. Like when you play hide and seek with your kids, and you're in the closet with the lights off. God can't see you do that, right? Yeah, he can. So Jonah goes down to the bottom of the ship, and he falls asleep. And while he's sleeping, God creates a storm. And everyone else on the ship is starting to freak out. The waves are crashing back and forth. The water's just churning, and it's scary. And they start crying out to their gods. They start praying to their gods to make it stop. And Jonah comes up to the deck, and they ask Jonah, "Who is your God? Pray to your God, make this stop." And Jonah tells them, "I know what the problem is. I ran. God's looking for me." And so he says to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." But the men weren't quite convinced that was going to fix it. Plus, they didn't want to have throwing this guy overboard on their shoulders. They didn't want to do that. But nothing was helping. They rowed and they rowed and they rowed, and they tried to get to the shore, and nothing happened. Nevertheless, the men rowed back hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore, they called out to the Lord, "O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it has pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. When Jonah told them to throw him into the sea, guys, he was still running. Because what was going to happen? Once he's thrown into this churning sea, he was going to drown. In his mind, that's what was going to happen. But God wasn't done with him yet. God was still pursuing him. So instead of drowning, this giant fish swallows up Jonah. And yet again, what should have happened didn't happen. You guys watch Animal Planet. You know what happens when something swallows something else? Jonah shouldn't have survived that. I mean, I've seen when they cut the belly of a whale open, I've seen what it looks like. Jonah shouldn't have survived that, but he did. Why? Because God was pursuing him. And God knew he needed to bring Jonah to a place of stillness so that Jonah could listen, so that Jonah could experience God. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to you, Lord, out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly I cried, and you heard my voice. And then Jonah finally obeyed God, and he went to Nineveh. But during that time, God never gave up on Jonah. Jonah disobeyed God, and he never gave up on him. Those of you who are parents, you know what it's like for your child to disobey you. It hurts, but you don't turn your back on them. My oldest Wolf, who's back there running media, he had a homework assignment that was due, and it didn't get done. And so we had this little conversation, and it ended with him cracking up laughing and me frustrated because I have no idea how that conversation went into him cracking up laughing. And I was disappointed in him for not doing his homework because he's a bright kid. He just chose not to apply himself. But I'm not going to turn my back on him. That's my child. I love him. And no matter what he does, I'm going to follow him. Most of us can relate to Jonah in one way or the other. We're not going to get stuck in the belly of a fish, but we've been to a place where we felt stuck, a place where we ran from God. 24 years old, my life was going great. I had my dream job. I was the interim vice president of public relations for an ad agency in Little Rock, Arkansas. My husband and I were going on 2 years of marriage, had just bought this cute little bungalow house in a historic district in Little Rock. We were planning for our future, planning for these kids we were going to have. Everything was great. And then it wasn't. This job I'd been working for months, this job that I was told was mine, it was just a formality that they do interviews. All of a sudden, it wasn't mine anymore. All that work I had put in, all those long hours, just pulled away from me, given to someone else. And then, due to some medical issues, I was told those babies I so desperately wanted, I wanted 6 of them. I don't know what I was thinking. I was told that wasn't going to happen. This house that we bought, this cute bungalow that I could see bringing these babies home to, it turned out to be a money pit, which happens with 100-year-old houses. But when you're 24 years old and you're young and you're in love and the future is bright, you don't see any of that until you start writing the checks for a new house or for a new roof, new piers underneath the house. I don't even know what those are. Termite damage. Oh yeah, and all that electrical in that 100-year-old house, it has to be brought up to code. It became a nightmare. And all of this on top of each other. And we had been church-going people. We'd gone to the local church every Sunday. We're in a Sunday school class, and, I prayed daily and spent quiet time. And then all of a sudden, I didn't anymore because I was done. How could a God that loved me so much let all this stuff happen? And then to add insult to injury, I get a phone call that my Omwai, which is my grandfather, it's in Vietnamese, was dying. And his dying wish was to meet his 2 granddaughters who lived in America who he'd never met. I was one of them. You can't just pack up and go to Vietnam. It's not like I'm just going to go to Texas. You have to get approved by the communist government to get there. You have to have a visa. You have to have a passport. All this stuff had to be done. I had to take time off work. Why? God, why are you doing this to me? So I did what any rational adult does. I ran. I was running from my life at home. I was running from God. I went to my boss and said, I need to take 3 weeks off to go to Vietnam. And he said, no. You're in the middle of a big project. You have to present to this new client. You can't go. And so I quit right then and there because that was the smart thing to do. And I got on a plane a few weeks later. Somehow, by the grace of God, I was able to get to Vietnam. And Jonah's quiet moment, that stillness where God spoke to him, happened in the belly of a whale, of giant fish. Mine happened in a 12-passenger van with 15 people, enough luggage for a small village, and dead fish. It was a great place to be, especially if you have personal space boundaries like I do. Imagine being crammed in this van with some people the rest are total strangers. They're apparently family members, but, why they all had to come, 7 hours to pick you up at the airport, you don't know. And not only did the fish smell, but the people smelled because we had been traveling for 3 days. And I had it. My anger level was at an all-time high. I was frustrated with the people I was with. I was frustrated with God. But it was in that moment, in that van, as we made the trip from Saigon to Roc Ya, that God spoke to me. As I watched my surroundings and daylight turned to darkness, I heard God, and he said, child, just be patient. That's all I ask. Be patient. Do that for me. And me and my tiredness kind of thought I was just hearing things. But throughout that trip, I heard him, just be patient. Things will get better. Come back to me. God met me where I was. He didn't expect me to come back to him. He came to where I was, in that van, in Vietnam, and he brought me to a quiet place. And I got home, and we put the house up for sale. I got another job consulting public relations. Everything was going well. And then that jet lag and the food poisoning I'd got on the airplane that I just couldn't get rid of, turned out I was 12 weeks pregnant. I just had to be patient. I just had to turn back to God. He didn't give up on me, even though he saw I gave up on him. Psalm 139 says, "You've looked deep into my heart, Lord, and you know all about me. You know when I am resting or when I am working, and from heaven you discover my thoughts. You notice everything I do and everywhere I go. Before I even speak a word, you know what I will say. And with your powerful arm, you protect me from every side. I can't understand all of this. Such wonderful knowledge is far above me. Where could I go to escape from your spirit or from your sight? If I were to climb up to the highest heavens, you would be there. If I were to dig down to the world of the dead, you would also be there. Suppose I had wings like the dawning day and flew across the ocean. Even then, your powerful arm would guide and protect me. Or suppose I said, I'll hide in the dark until night comes over to cover me over. But you see in the dark, because daylight and dark are the same to you. God knows all about you. He knows your stuff. He knows those things that you don't tell anybody. And he still loves you. He still pursues you. Why? Because you're his children. And God doesn't give up on his children. His pursuit of them is relentless. His love is so great that he sees beyond who we were, who we are, and leads us to who he intends for us to be. All we have to do is stop running and follow. To realize that while people may fail us and leave, God never does. You know, that day running with Felix, he said, Mommy, I know that you won't stop chasing me. But the harsh reality is one day I will have to stop chasing him because I won't be here. And that's the reality of it. But my hope and my prayer is that I have lived a life where he sees and understands that that's okay. Because where my pursuit of him stops, God's keeps going forever and ever, no matter what he does. When we learn to accept God's love, his undying pursuit, we also learn how to love one another, how to stop running from the people God has chosen for us to love. If we go back to 1 John 4, it tells us that God is love. Well, what do we know about love? Love is patient. Love is kind. It isn't jealous. It doesn't brag. It isn't arrogant. It isn't rude. It doesn't seek its own advantage. It isn't irritable. It doesn't keep a record of complaints. It isn't happy with injustice. It's happy with the truth. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. Friends, our Father is patient. He is kind. He endures all things. He pursues his children with passion and patience, and he meets us where we are. Not with his arms crossed, but his arms wide open. He never fails. And I know sometimes God's presence in our lives may not always be audible. There are times when we can't hear him. And there are some of us who may never actually hear him. We won't hear that voice. But that doesn't mean he has left you, and it doesn't mean he's not pursuing you. For what we cannot hear, he has laid out for us to see, to feel, to experience. God's pursuit of his children was, is, and will always be patient, passionate, and relentless. Will you pray with me?